good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming and joining us today. I'm here to present one of our HOPE presentations. We have different forms of this. This one is specific for the workplace. Throughout the presentation, if you guys have questions, please feel free to ask. I'd rather hear what you want to know than just kind of keep talking. But we'll go through, or I can take questions at the end as well. Once we are done with the presentation, we have our mock teen bedroom set up over here. Basically, the idea is it's set up as a teen bedroom, and we hide different drugs and paraphernalia throughout the bedroom. And it's set up to educate parents of where their kids might be hiding things. And it can be for all ages. When we set the bedroom up, it's 18 and older, so we're not giving kids ideas when we set it up. As well as we have some information on the back. Please feel free to take whatever you need. If you also want something for your company or your business, feel free to ask at the end. I can give you my card and we can provide you with that information as well. Okay? So our presentation is called HOPE, which stands for Heroin Opioid Prevention Education. And like I said, this is specific for the workplace. So why is this important to you? About 21 million Americans live with a substance abuse disorder. Addiction is a disease, and it does not discriminate. So it doesn't discriminate on age, sex, money, how much money you have, how little money you have, where you live, what you do. It can happen to anybody. And someone who abuses prescription painkillers is 19 times more likely to start using heroin. Now, why is it important for your family? In a recent poll, nearly 1/3 of respondents knew someone addicted to opioids. Over 50% of millennials believe it's easy to get illegal opioids, whether it be from family members that have been prescribed them, whether they've been prescribed them for some type of injury or surgery themselves, whether they're getting them from friends at school, they find it easy. And 75% of that youth who misuse painkillers say that they get it from friends or family. The average age for first use right now is 14 years old. And why is it important for your work? You can happen with safety issues, absenteeism, turnover, the healthcare cost, relationships, and overall workplace culture. And most people who use mist drugs are employed full-time. Like I said, it doesn't discriminate. So let's test your knowledge a little bit. U.S. comprises only 5% of the world's population. We consume blank of the all prescription painkillers. So the options are 40, 60, 80, or 100%. So I'm gonna go through them and I want you to raise your hand when I get to the one you think fits in that statement. Is it A, 40%, B, 60%, C, 80%, D, 100? Nice job. It is 80%. In the US, one person dies every how many minutes from an opioid overdose? The answers are 12, 23, 36, and 43. As I go through, again, raise your hand. Is it A, 12? B, 23, C, 36, D, 43. Unfortunately, it's every 12 minutes. And that's just from opioid overdoses. In PA, at what age can someone refuse treatment for a drug addiction? Is it A, any age, B, 14 years old, C, 18, or 21? Ready? A, any age, B, 14 years old, C, 18 years old, D, 21 years old. It's any age. Okay. So if we think about that and how young the national average is, it's kind of concerning.
So I was under the impression that minors under the age of 14 cannot refuse treatment.
It's any age for drug addiction. For I don't know about like mental health or things like that, but for drug addiction in particular, it's any age. What percentage of workplaces are impacted by opioid abuse? Is it A, 20%, B, 45%, C, 70%, or D, 95%? You think that D? It's 70%. So 70% of the workplaces are impacted in some form by opioid abuse. That is a pretty high number. So what are opioids? Opioids are prescription painkillers such as codeine, Oxycontin, methadone, hydrocodone, tramadol, Demerol, Percocet, Vicodin. So these are things that are prescribed to you by doctors. Usually if you have some type of injury, if you have some type of surgery, you are prescribed these prescriptions. So when they first came out, they were only used in a hospital setting because doctors understood how addictive they were. So they were used in a control setting and they weren't sent home with them. In 1996, Purdue Pharma came out and said they created a new Oxycontin, form of Oxycontin that would be less addictive, and they said less than 1%. So they kept pushing doctors to prescribe, knowing all and well that it was addictive. So they are if you hear in the news all the time about Purdue Pharma and the Stacker family, they're one of the reasons we have a crisis right now because of pushing those opioid prescriptions. So doctors were prescribing them because that's what they were told. So once they started prescribing them, they were prescribing large amounts at the same time. So it wasn't like they were just giving a 30-day prescription they had to return if they were still in pain and then going through. Recently, because of the crisis, doctors are less quick to jump on prescribing these. If they do prescribe them, they're only given a small amount, and then they have to return, and most often they are then sent to a pain management doctor to look at other forms of treatment. So opioids are legal in the sense that they are prescription painkillers and they can be prescribed. However, they turn illegal when people are selling them, giving them to other people, and they're taking them without a prescription. Any questions on the opioids? Heroin. So heroin has been around for a long time, and it comes from the poppy plant. That's where it comes from. And it became popular, I don't like to use that word, but it became more prevalent in the U.S. after the Vietnam War. A lot of veterans came back addicted to heroin. And at that time, you could only inject heroin using a needle. If you would use it any other way, it would have no effect on you. It wouldn't get you high. So that's what they use for the needle. So most oftentimes or not, when you see in movies and things like that, or you hear, you automatically think you only use a needle. However, today, heroin is so pure that you can sniff it, you can smoke it, and inject it. So I'm going to go through all three of them, and when you get to the one that you think is the most addictive and the most deadly, I want you to raise your hand, okay? Who thinks it's sniffing it? Smoking it? Injection? You should have raised your hand for all three. There's not one that differs. They're all equally as addictive and they're all equally as deadly. They all can cause a deadly overdose with one-time use, all three of them. Today we also have the danger of them adding fentanyl into heroin and amongst other drugs as well. Fentanyl is one of the most dangerous drugs in the world according to CDC. It is still used in a hospital setting, but that's the only place it's used. You might hear fentanyl patches and things like that that are given for end-of-life pain and for cancer patients. It's a different form. However, those who might be addicted could use those in some sense. So if you've had a surgery, you have probably been given fentanyl. It's used under anesthesia as almost like a paralytic and a painkiller. So they also don't have to ask you if they can give you fentanyl either. So that being said, if you have addiction that runs in your family, or you yourself have struggled with some type of an addiction, if you're going into surgery, you might want to consult your doctor before they give it to you under surgery. There's other prescriptions they can give you that's not as strong. You can also have an adverse effect to it as well, depending on how your makeup is. So fentanyl is being added into heroin. Fentanyl is also being sold as other prescription painkillers, like Vicodin, Percocet, Oxycontin, because there are people out there that buy the pill presses and sell them as an Oxycontin, and it's a pure fentanyl pill. We'll see in a minute, there's a picture that shows like a deadly dose of heroin, fentanyl, and carfentanil. Carfentanil is even stronger than regular fentanyl and is basically an elephant tranquilizer. It's like grain size, salt size, that could be deadly. Also to note, we are talking about opioids and heroin today, but it's important to know that they're lacing other drugs with fentanyl as well. In the Lehigh Valley, there have been reports of them lacing fentanyl in marijuana. There's been a lot of overdoses coming into the local hospitals, especially younger kids that don't have a tolerance to any type of drug. So, if you know somebody, you yourself use, we don't condone the use at the Center for Humanistic Change, but it's important for you to know that if you do use marijuana or you know somebody does and they start to feel differently, you need to seek medical attention immediately because it could be laced with something. Because it's a very white powder and it's a very small amount that can do damage, you might not know it's in there. Any questions on the heroin or fentanyl or anything we talked about so far? So there's 3 waves in the rise of opioid overdose deaths and why we're seeing this. So the first one I kind of talked about already is the increased prescribing of opioids in the 1990s, with overdose deaths involving prescription opioids increasing since at least 1999. So there's always been an increase. But the next wave is where we start to see an even more increase in deaths. Beginning in 2010, there was a rapid increase in heroin deaths. And then in wave 3, beginning 2013, with significant increases in overdose deaths involving synthetic opioids, especially fentanyl. You didn't hear so much about the fentanyl at that point, but it was there. There was actually a young man who overdosed in the PP&L Center when they first opened. And he thought he had heroin and it was pure fentanyl. And at that point, they weren't really talking about fentanyl. They weren't talking about lacing heroin with other drugs, and he already had it. So it was here, but it wasn't talked about. So from 1999 to 2017, we lost 400,000 people from an overdose involving any type of opioid, including prescription and illegal opioids. So if we look at this map in 2003, these are overdose deaths per 100,000 people. So you can see there are some high red spots out on the West Coast, Nevada area, even down a little further, and then over there as well. Look what happens in 2014. Almost the entire West Coast is that orange-red color. The Midwest there, it's kind of, but East Coast is still that red-orange down in Florida. Even over in Alaska and Hawaii, it's that dark color. So that's a huge jump. So in 2017, let's look at opioid overdoses by age. So from 0 to 24 was 4,173 people. 25 to 34 was 13,181. 35 to 44, 11,149. 45 to 54, 10,207. And 55 and older was still at 8,877. So a total of 47,600. 60% of all overdose deaths were opioids. Pennsylvania is, right now, we're back in the #1 spot. We fluctuate between Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia are the 3 top states of overdose deaths with opioids, and right now Pennsylvania is #1. So talking about those fatal amounts. So it might not even take this much. It all depends. But on average, the fatal dose of heroin is 10 to 12 milligrams. Fentanyl is only 1 to 2 milligrams, and carfentanol is 0.2. So if you compare that to the size of the coin there, that's a lot. It doesn't take much. So prescription drugs. There's also a difference. Prescription drugs, when taken properly, opioids, are beneficial. It's proven that it works for pain. But then it starts getting into misuse and addiction and dependency. So misuse is taking more that's prescribed, taking medication for a reason other than for what it was prescribed for, or using someone else's prescription. So that taking something that was prescribed for something else, so say you have a surgery and you're prescribed 35 Percocet, okay? But after like a week of the surgery, you're not taking it as much. Maybe you're only taking one a day and it was a two a day prescription. Or maybe you feel really good and ibuprofen and Tylenol work for you, so you don't take the opioids. But then 3, 4, 5 months later, you sprain your ankle. So you start taking that again when it wasn't prescribed for that injury. And that could lead to it. So let's look at misuse versus abuse. So abuse is using the medication to get high. So you may crush the pills, you may snort the pills, or mix them with alcohol to give you a different effect. And then versus addiction. So addiction is a chronic, compulsive drug seeking and use, despite the harmful consequences that comes along with it. I like to describe the stages of this, especially with kids in a situation, because with prescription opioids and the rank of first use to a possible addiction can be anywhere from 5 to 35 days. So that is within a prescription. So if you are even taking it as prescribed and you even stop early, if you were taking it as prescribed for 5 days and on that 6th day you decide, I don't need them anymore, I'm going to get rid of them, you might start to feel withdrawal symptoms. You might feel kind of lousy, like you have a cold, because that is that 5 to 35 day range. So I like to kind of describe it with the kids in a way that with alcohol. So first time there's a school dance, they decide to have a beer with a friend and they split it. So it's not going to do anything to them, but they're going to feel relaxed and they're going to like that feeling. And then the next time there's a dance, they're going to do it again, and so it's one full beer instead of a half a beer with their friends. And then the next dance, it's 2, 3 beers, 4 maybe. Then they start to build that tolerance, and then it just continues to cycle. And now it's not just the dances, it's a basketball game, it's a football game, it's to go to school. So it just kind of keeps building. So let's look at the brain and understand why our brain can have this addiction within the 5 to 35 days and why we like the way these pills make us feel, because truly it does happen. So in our brain, we're all built with these Y-shaped looking receptors, and they're opioid receptors. That's what we're born with, because our body naturally produces a chemical called dopamine. So dopamine is released when we do something we enjoy. Spending time with family and friends, listening to music, going to a concert, playing a video game, whatever it might be that you enjoy doing, your body releases that chemical and it makes us feel happy, it makes us feel good, it makes us want to do that activity again. Opioids do the same thing, except it's harder, stronger, and faster. So if you can see normal activity, this would be somebody that's listening to music, and on the other side there's an opioid user. You can see it's just flooding the brain. It's making it an excessive amount. So not only do you have your natural dopamine, you have this chemical the opioid chemical being released as well, and it's acting the same way. But if you notice, there's not enough Y-shaped receptors to catch all of that. So our brain is so adaptable that we create more Y-shaped receptors, which means this person is now building a tolerance. So they need now more of the drug in order to fill those Y-shaped receptors that are screaming for something in order to get that high or to get that feeling. This also can represent somebody who's going through withdrawal or somebody who is actually in treatment. Because what happens is once we build that tolerance level and we continue to take that drug and we form that addiction, our brain stops producing that dopamine naturally. So it's looking for some outside source to bring that in, meaning the drug. So things that used to make you happy might not make you so happy anymore. And it will eventually come back, but it takes a very long time. That's why we have a high relapse rate. This is one of the reasons, because they need to feel that feeling again. A lot of heroin users talk about chasing that first high. They'll never feel that same thing again that they do, but they're always going to want to try. So they continue to take it. We're going to talk about withdrawal now. So that would be something as a withdrawal. Your brain is screaming for that drug. So this is a good representation of what withdrawal would look like. You're sweating profusely, but you're freezing cold at the same time. Your heart is racing. You have muscle cramps, so it feels like your muscles are tearing inside your body. You might be hallucinating. You are starving, but as soon as you eat, it comes back up or it comes out the other end. It's constant, okay? This can last anywhere from a week to a month, depending on how severe the person's addiction is. This is one of the biggest reasons we have a relapse rate, because if they get one more hit, this all goes away as soon as it all goes away. And this could happen fairly quickly, especially with heroin. Heroin only has about a half-life of 15 to 30 minutes. That's how long it lasts. So they're constantly using. We work with people in recovery at the center, which is great. They come out and talk to our students. They come out and talk to anybody, really, and tell their story and share their story. And they never know how to explain this part properly. They can never get the words. Joe, who we work with, has been doing this for almost 2 years now, and he still struggles with it. His best way he describes it to the kids is if he was standing in that auditorium talking to them and someone came in with a baseball bat and beat the living crap out of him and broke bones in his body or whatever, he'd take that over going through this one more day. That's how strong it is. And a lot of times people go through this in jail with no support. Luckily, our hospitals now are starting to support people who are going through withdrawal, starting medical assistant treatment in the hospital setting until they can get them a bed in a facility, which is great. But a lot of people don't agree to it because it could take a while for them to get a bed. Any questions on this? So with withdrawal too, like I said, it can last a very long time. And that's why we have that. And I talked about chasing that first high or that tolerance level. Some of the people we work with recovery were using 50 bags plus a day. And they weren't getting high anymore. They were just staying away from this. Yes?
I guess within neuroscience, are there any initiatives for, rebalancing the dopamine receptors, or is that really just too advanced or too...
I'm not 100% sure. I know those who go through recovery, a lot of the times they'll end up on antidepressants and things like that to help try to balance that and kind of work with that. They say it usually takes about a year to 2 years to kind of come back to normal. But with the brain too, it's important for you guys to know your brain's not fully developed till the age of 25, and your prefrontal cortex is the last part of your brain to develop. And that's like your decision making, where your personality comes out, and like all that kind of stuff that you need. So if someone starts using drugs before the age of 25, they'll stop that brain development. It affects the brain development. And that also takes a long time to come back. So I don't know so much as the research, neuroscience-wise of it, but there are ways that they're working to try to help with that. Like somebody we work with, Joey, started using heroin at 14, and he's been, He's 24 now, and he's been clean for 4 years, and he kind of still acts like a 14-year-old because he stunted that development there. He's doing well, but it's still kind of there. Any other questions? So some signs to look out for. They can be visual. Opioids make you itchy, so they might be scabby. They might look very tired, dark circles in their eyes, or they could look completely normal. Nausea can happen during use or with withdrawal. A lot of people who use opioids will throw up, especially with heroin. Perfusive sweating is another sign. It's going to come up. Pinpoint pupils is the clear sign for opioid heroin use. All other drugs are going to dilate your pupils. Heroin and opioids are going to make them teeny tiny. And then track marks. A lot of people associate track marks on the arms. That's what you see in movies. They're going to use wherever they can find a vein. So behind the knees, between the toes, behind the ears, wherever it might be. A lot of times people won't use the arm because it gets infected very quickly, or they don't want people to see it, so they'll try to hide it. And then nodding out. So when we're sitting somewhere watching TV or even at work and you get sleepy, when we kind of get tired, our head kind of just drops, but we have full control of our bodies. Those who are using opioids and heroin have no control over their body, and they'll do what's called nodding out. So that basically means they'll kind of completely go over ragdoll, have no control, and then just kind of come right back up like nothing happened. This is Lindsay. This is Lindsay at the height of her heroin use. This was taken by her mom. Lindsay also tells a story, Lindsay's mom tells a story of her sitting at the dinner table talking to them and nodding out right into her mac and cheese and coming up like she had no idea what happened. Oh, I'm just looking down at the floor, or oh, I'm just doing this. Happy to tell you that with our theme of hope, Lindsay's doing fantastic now. She's 7 years clean. She is working in the social work field. She recently got married. She has custody back of her daughter, so she's doing fantastic. Lindsay's somebody else that'll come out and talk with us as well.
How about weight loss?
Yes, so it can be a significant weight loss, can be another sign. The problem with the opioids and heroin is sometimes it's hard to see the signs because they could look completely normal, especially if they might not be using in a public setting and they're just using it at home. They would show more of like the withdrawal symptoms, always being sick, late, frequent urination. And the going to the bathroom a lot might not mean frequent urination, it might be going to use in the bathroom. They'll use anywhere. They can find a spot. Tip for you, if you have young kids or you have grandkids, whatever it might be, changing tables in the bathroom, try not to use them. That's the first place they'll heat up their heroin and do it on the changing table in a bathroom. So always wipe it down, always put a cover if you have to use it. If you see black marks on it, probably a pure sign of somebody was using a hot spoon on it. Problem with the fentanyl now too, very, very small traces, especially for a little baby. If they put their hand under the mat, that could be dangerous as well, and that can go through the skin. It doesn't even have to be ingestion. So just a heads up on that note. We hear that from the local police. So some behavioral signs now. The nodding out, a decline in performance, sleeping on the job, arriving to work late, increased absenteeism, difficulty focusing, frequent bathroom breaks, long sleeves, changes to appearance. That could be the extreme weight loss, but it affects everybody differently too. Irritability, sense of euphoria, sedation, and stealing in criminal offenses. A lot of the people that are in local prisons are not there because of drug charges. They're there because of theft, stealing from family members, doing whatever they can to get money to buy the drugs. Why we had a big increase on the money end, why we had a big increase of a lot of people moving to heroin from the opioid pills is because it's a lot cheaper. So today, pills usually go for $1 a milligram. So 25 milligram pill is a $25 pill. A bag of heroin is $5 to $10, and fentanyl's even less. Fentanyl's like change. It's very cheap. So that's another reason why they're using fentanyl instead of the actual pills, because they can get it so cheap.
Can fentanyl be made? I know like the drug manufacturers make certain things, but the drug sellers figure out a way to
Yes.
synthesize it.
A lot of the fentanyl's coming over from China, Canada, and Mexico are the three places they're coming from, and it's manufactured fentanyl. It's not the drug company's fentanyl.
So all the drugs you've not talked about, cocaine, meth, and all that, are they part of opiates, or are they just different?
They're a different form of drug, so they're not an opioid. Those are going to be stimulants. So those are man-made drugs. That cocaine and methamphetamines are making a huge jump around this area too. The Easton Task Force just let us know that heroin is down, fentanyl is up, and methamphetamines are up in their area.
Cheaper?
Not as cheap as heroin. It's going to be more expensive. We've gotten a lot of reports that colleges are struggling with the cocaine now. We got reports too that instead of them using like Adderall and Ritalin that they used to use to kind of help them stay up, to study, to party, those party drugs, they're now using the cocaine. So we're seeing an increase in the college campuses as well. So it's definitely changing, but we still have this crisis, but the methamphetamine, cocaine is kind of getting up there. Any other questions? So what might an overdose look like? Their face is extremely pale. The skin's clammy to a touch. The body's limp. They really have no control. If you would lift their arm, there's no kind of pullback on it. Fingernails or lips have a blue or even purple cast to them. The person cannot be awakened from sleep, or they're unable to speak. So they won't even respond to like external stimulation. Breathing is very slow or can be stopped, and the heartbeat is very slow or stopped. With the breathing, you might hear like a gurgling sound, like they have like congestion in their lungs. That's fluid starting to build up and they're trying to breathe, so that's another sign as well. So how would you respond to an overdose? Like I said, this can happen anywhere. It happened in a public place. It could happen in your office. You just never know. So how are you going to respond? You're going to call 911 immediately. I'll talk about the Good Samaritan law in a second. And then you're going to administer Narcan or naloxone if you have it. How many of your businesses keep that on hand? Do you know? The schools do. School nurses' offices do. It's a good idea to have it. There's a standing order in Pennsylvania where anybody can go into a pharmacy and request Narcan. Usually your insurance covers it, no questions asked. If your insurance doesn't cover it, the naloxone is cheaper than the Narcan. But anybody can go in, the pharmacist won't question you, they'll just give you the prescription, run it through your insurance. Narcan is a miracle drug in the sense that it can reverse an opioid or heroin overdose. That's the only overdose that's going to reverse. So remember the brain I showed you with those Y-shaped receptors and the opioids sit in there? What Narcan does is it goes in, it pulls that opioid off the receptor, and it stays there and blocks it from attaching. So with that, it allows them to start breathing again, their heart rate to start going back to normal. A lot of times they'll wake up immediately after administering Narcan. However, with the increase in fentanyl, we're seeing 8-10 doses not even working. Another great thing about Narcan is if the person is not using opioids or is not a drug overdose, and you administer it, it can't harm them. So say you might suspect that it's an overdose, but you really don't know. They also have some other health issues, but you're going to administer it anyway. You won't get in trouble for doing that. You're kind of covered under the PA standing order and the Good Samaritan law. So the Good Samaritan law, if you have kids, tell grandkids, whoever. This is so important. We always stress this with the kids when we go out and do presentations. The state of Pennsylvania, and amongst other states, were realizing that people weren't calling for help when it came to overdoses and things like that. So what PA lawmakers got together, police officers, EMTs, they created this law called the Good Samaritan law, which means if you have two people that are together doing drugs and you notice that that other person is overdosing, but you have drugs in your person, you don't want to call. You need to call, because under the Good Samaritan law, the police will respond. Usually the police respond before the EMTs. They will respond, and you and that person will not be charged with any type of crime. Even if you have drugs on your person, even if you are under the influence. Even if kids are under the age drinking, they will not have a charge placed on them. If you have an active warrant, that's a different question. You would be taken into custody and you'd have to go through the warrant. If you're on parole, it would be up to the parole officer's discretion. And from what I'm hearing, a lot of the times if they're saving somebody, it kind of evens it out. But I don't want to go on the record saying that. I've just been hearing that from presentations we've done. So don't be afraid to call. Tell your kids not to be afraid to call. Tell your students not to be afraid to call. It's a great law that we have, and most states do have it now, but PA was one of the first. Any questions on the Good Samaritan?
Do you know if New Jersey has that?
I want to say I think they do. I'm pretty sure New Jersey does have it. Chelsea, you said yeah. I'm almost positive it's almost every state. But it's a great law. And we always tell the kids, if you take one thing from what we talked about today, please take this, especially when we do the current drug trends presentations. And sometimes we do that around prom time. So it's important that they know that that's out there, and it kind of protects them. Also, too, with a lot of the police stations doing the warm handoff now, they'll ask you if you want to try to get help, too, in that situation, which is another good thing. If you do have a problem, you can walk into almost any local police station and ask for help, even if you have drugs on you. They'll take that and try to get you help. Any intake facilities, any hospitals as well.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
If you go into a drugstore to get some and say, I want to get some, like you want to keep some at work, it goes against your insurance, and you, like, it's an open prescription from the state, but it's for you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like you can go and say, well, I want to get 2 packages of it to keep at work.
Mm-hmm.
It goes against your prescription and your insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And I double checked on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
We get ours through the vet from Health Bureau, but we had to go through all kinds of hoops to get some to keep at school. So I was just checking at the drugstore, like, what if
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's how
Yeah.
it works.
And two, you can always contact Lehigh County Drug and Alcohol or Northampton County Drug and Alcohol. They'll work with you to try to get some for your business or your school, whatever, if you need more. Pennsylvania also did a day in October, and I'm hoping they do it again this October, where you could go to a specific site and pick some up. And I know that they ran out within like the first half hour, 45 minutes of the event.
And there is a website, I think it's still active, called Get Naloxone Now.
Mm-hmm.
And you go in there and it's an online site to tell you
How to use it.
Naloxone.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
do want you to, if you're gonna get some for work and you're gonna get it through the county, you have to have that training for your people.
Yeah.
That'll be part of
Thank
the
you,
requirement.
Kathy. Yeah, it will be part of the requirement. We just did one at Allentown for the nurses there. It's super easy. It's a nasal spray. It's one shot in the nostril. We're hearing that some people are doing a half a shot in each nostril in case the person has a deviated septum, so at least they're getting one dose. However, the instructions say a full nasal shot in one nostril, holding the one side, tilting the head back a little bit. Another important thing about the Narcan is it only lasts for a short amount of time, so that person should seek medical attention immediately, because that opioid can reattach and they can overdose again without taking more of the drug. So they have to seek medical attention to make sure they're getting the proper treatment.
I was wondering if you have done any surveys with the center on whether or not more maybe teens or young people are reporting that they're trying more risky drugs, knowing that something like this is out there. I know there's been that controversy of even with like open needles and things, like why do they get clean needles or
Yeah.
provide a Narcan when maybe more people will want to use it, but we know they're using it anyway. Is this just a safety thing?
Yeah.
Have you guys heard any information, like some data on that?
Chelsea?
So we do them in a lot of our programs where we ask the teens. There's a big difference between the first time you ask them, like in the pre-surveys, and then 8 weeks later when I really know them and they're kind of telling us a little more. From what I've been seeing, the teens I've worked with, so I work out in Easton, I work in Allentown a lot in their middle schools and stuff. It's more like the prescription drugs, the marijuana and stuff like that. It hasn't, for teen-wise, I haven't seen as many with like needles and meth and cocaine and stuff like that, but like when we get to the adult age and we do like the test for them, that's when I'm starting to see more, and like adult age like 18, like, you know, out in the work field and stuff like that. So most of the teenagers, they're very honest about like taking like Molly and ecstasy and stuff like that, but I haven't had too many really, and this is in multiple schools in multiple areas where I haven't gotten a lot back on that.
Yeah, and I haven't seen anything in the sense where that they know now that there's something that could help, that they're like, oh, I'm going to do this now because it's going to help, because it doesn't always work. And we stress that a lot when we do the education piece.
The statistics for the age groups, the teenage, the 0 to 24 was the lowest group. It was the 25
Yep.
and up.
But for alcohol and prescription drugs,
Is it
teens
yeah.
are the highest.
Yeah, and I'm curious. Narcan hasn't been out that long, so I'm curious to see as statistics come out if there is seeing this kind of trend like that. But quite honestly, I don't think there would be, especially amongst the teens. Maybe the adults might think, oh, okay, but like Chelsea said, we don't really see the teens using the heroin as much. It's out there, but
Yeah, it happens, but it's not high.
yeah.
No, honestly, we had the Narcan in school, probably not for the kids, it's probably
The-
gonna be
the
for
staff.
parent,
Yep.
staff, somebody who comes into the school.
Absolutely.
I was just gonna say, I know Blue Cross, when I utilized my standing order, they actually covered the SVO, which is the intramuscular injection.
Oh, wow. Oh, I didn't know that. Well, that's good to know.
It's a lot harder to give to someone,
Yeah.
especially if you're already freaked out.
Yeah. When you do administer, you're going to wait 2 to 3 minutes if they trying to respond. So touching their arm, doing sternal. Always try to wear gloves because of the fentanyl risk if you can. And if you are certified CPR, chest compression only, because if it was laced with fentanyl, you have the potential to get that as well. So just some other tips. Any other questions? So how are you going to respond at work? You're basically going to do the same thing, but you want to try to be ahead of the overdose. So you're going to want to know your workplace drug policy. If you do suspect someone is using drugs, know the procedure determined by your employer, so like what to do next. Drug use on the job is a safety issue, so err on the side of caution. So even if you have a slight suspicion of it, you should probably bring it to somebody's attention. Offer support to someone suffering with substance abuse disorder. Offer support if you know a coworker who has a loved one suffering with substance abuse disorder. And if you yourself need help, ask for it. And our biggest thing is prevention works. This is what we do. We're a prevention education agency. So prevention starts as having the discussion, talking about it, educating, but there's some things you can do. Storing your prescription drugs, like I said, that 75% of kids say that they've gotten them from a family member or for a friend. So family member has them just out in their medicine cabinet and they just go and get it. So locking up those prescriptions if you do have them in the home. Disposing of unused, like I gave the story that you had a surgery, that you didn't use them all, but 5 months later they're still there. Get rid of them as soon as you're done with them. Almost all pharmacies now have a drop box that you can just go and put them in. It locks up. There's no way somebody can get into it. Or you can dispose of them yourself. They're bags called doTERRA bags. Those are sold at like a CVS, Rite Aid. I think Walmart even sells them now. Basically what it is it deactivates your pills. Those big bags, Chelsea, do you have them? Those big bags hold up to 45 pills. So basically what you do in there, you put the pills in, it tells you how much water to add on it into it. You shake it up, wait a little bit, and you can throw it right in the trash. It completely deactivates. There's also Dispose RX, which are single ones. Those can do about 15 pills, I'd say, in a water bottle. You would just take like a plastic water bottle, fill it with the amount of water it says, put the packet in, shake it up, and you can throw them right in the garbage. If you don't have, do you want to add something?
I was just gonna say, be careful. On the instructions back here, it says that you can put it like in the actual pill bottle. Be careful throwing your pill bottles away. If someone does get that out of the trash, they
Can use the prescription.
Pick up your prescription for your grandparents, your parents, and stuff like that, so they can actually go fill your prescription.
Yeah.
And pick it up.
So we suggest using a water bottle so that doesn't happen, or always take your labels off your pill bottles if you're throwing away, no matter what type of prescription it is. Always kind of shred those up. If you don't have access to those, cat litter and water also works. Never flush them down the toilet and never throw them just away without deactivating them. People will go through the trash to find them. Like I said, starting the conversation, talk to your employer, talk to your employees, have presentations like this, talk to your colleagues, to your family members, go back and tell your families what you learned today. To your physicians, if you want to talk to them about something you might be on or what to look out for, maybe a family member's on something. Talk to your students if you have students, talk to your kids, talk to your grandkids, just talk. And talk about opioids, addiction, and recovery. There's such a stigma that goes along with addiction. Luckily, it's starting to kind of disappear, not completely, but addiction is one of the most stigmatized diseases in the world. And with the crisis we have now, because it's so stigmatized, it kind of keeps increasing. Luckily, we are starting to get past that. I'm going to put a plug in here. Iron Pigs is having a recovery night on August 6th. It's going to be an amazing event. There's a lot of vendors there. Lehigh and Northampton counties are inviting people that are in recovery to the game. There's going to be a recovery circle on the field before, which I just found out yesterday, which I think is so cool. But there's just going to be a lot of education there and helping to stop that stigma that comes along with addiction. So how to get help? These numbers are also on the papers that you have gotten in your bags today. Lehigh County Drug and Alcohol, Northampton County Drug and Alcohol. Again, if you would like to get Narcan for your business, you can contact them. They could work with you on that. If you are struggling yourself or you know someone who's struggling, you can call those numbers and they can point you in the right direction. In your bags today, you got a bunch of different information on the things that we talked about. There's a stress ball in there, there's Hope tissues, there's a magnet, the Care Enough Not to Share magnet. Make sure you're not sharing your prescriptions with anyone, not just painkillers, any type of prescription. There's a Dispose RX in there, one of those mini things to get rid of your prescriptions. And then there's two papers in there, and there's also big stacks back there that you can take. On those two papers, it has information for Lehigh County and Northampton County services that can help those that are struggling and the families themselves. It's both English and Spanish. If you would like to take one of the tear-off pads for your business, feel free to take them. There's some over there. We can always get you more, like I said, and our number is on that form. Please feel free to take any of the brochures, please go through the bedroom. The girls will educate you over there what to look out for. It's a great thing to have. We can come set that up at any type of community. Like I said, we're a non-for-profit. We are funded by Lehigh and Northampton County Drug and Alcohol. So if your business, your community group, your school, whatever it might be in Lehigh or Northampton County and you're interested in some programs, feel free to reach out to us. We can come do whatever. And there would be no cost to you in Lehigh and Northampton counties. So thank you guys so much for your time today. Any questions?
Yeah, do you have any statistics on people who do not purposely take these drugs, but are given to them unsuspectingly?
In the sense, like them being prescribed them or given to them?
Given to them by somebody else and they have no idea that they're taking the drug, like you're lacing a drink or something like that.
I don't have any statistics on that. It does happen. They're not really going to lace them with the opioids and heroin. They're more likely to lace with like hallucinogens and things like that. Don't have any statistics as far as how much it's still happening, but it could. But with these, a lot of times we do a program for older adults too. Kind of the same thing, but just making sure they understand that even if they're taking them properly, some might forget that they took them that morning and then take them again and that sort of thing. So just being aware of the dangers, making sure they're talking to their family members and their doctors as well.
I have a family member, a heroin addict, saved by Narcan. I think it took 2 years or so to bring him around, 21. Best liar in the world. Just suddenly over the past month, a dramatic weight loss. So without being accusing, I'm trying to figure out how to
help.
diffuse this,
Yeah.
how to help. I'm way out of touch at my age.
Yeah. So those papers that are in there, there's a bunch of numbers on there. You can call Lehigh Northampton County Drug and Alcohol and tell them what the issue is, and they can kind of lead you in the direction. Chelsea, did you have something to add?
I was gonna say, just be careful though, because sometimes when people are in recovery from it, not in specifically in your case, they might be losing weight for a different reason. Sometimes when they're doing the drug, they're actually not losing weight, they're gaining weight or something, like depending on what they're using and how it affects their body personally. So they might go into recovery and then might start losing weight afterwards. We have somebody that we know who's very, very, very slim now that they're clean afterwards. So just be cautious of that. That sometimes happens as well.
It can definitely happen, but it could be the opposite too. But like I said, if you're struggling to find the way or the help, those numbers on there could definitely help. Any other questions or comments?
What happens a lot of times to the police, when they go on a scene and they have to help somebody, they have been gone into overdose just from helping the person. Because the fentanyl was there, they didn't know, they touched it, they picked it up and took a sniff, and that was enough to put them down.
Yeah. With the car fentanyl, I don't know if you guys read this story in California a couple months ago where 13 people overdosed in one area and then they had police officers overdosing as well. They were double gloved going into that site and it went through the double glove into their skin. So that car fentanyl is dangerous. It's an elephant tranquilizer. So like grain size small salt can be deadly and can potentially go through your skin, especially if you don't have a tolerance to anything. So like if it's the first drug you've ever done or you've touched, that could be a factor as well. So just be aware of that when helping people. Always call 911. Remember that Good Samaritan law. Thank you for sharing that, Gabby. Appreciate that. All right, thank you guys. Feel free to go into that bedroom then as well. Take any pamphlets if you'd like any for your facility. We can also provide those as well.